There we go. Hello and welcome, everybody. We're now ready to begin today's webinar, A Social Network Toolkit for Working During and After the Pandemic. My name is Bethany Dennis. I'm with the Rutgers Center for HR and Leadership Development, and I'll be your host and moderator. Next slide. There we go. In this webinar, we're going to build a toolkit for developing high-quality personal and professional relationships while telecommuting or preparing to transition back into work. Specifically, we're going to discuss pathways for developing high-quality relationships, how to maintain personal resilience and a healthy sense of connection, and techniques to leverage your connections to ease work strains during and after the pandemic. This executive and professional education webinar is presented by the Rutgers School of Management Labor Relations Center for HR and Leadership Development. And our center develops and delivers innovative learning and development solutions that strengthen and advance the individual, workforce, and organization as a whole through a powerful combination of expert class instruction and peer interaction led by distinguished Rutgers University faculty, thought leaders, and industry experts. This webinar is scheduled for 45 minutes. Q&A is going to be at the end, and participants are all muted. So please submit any questions that you have throughout the webinar in the WebEx questions box, and then we're going to answer them at the end. This webinar is going to be recorded, and a link to the presentation will be sent to you afterwards. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Above is Dr. Jessica Methot. She's an associate professor of Human Resource Management at the Rutgers School of Management and Labor Relations, and she's a distinguished research professor at the University of Exeter's Business School. Dr. Methot conducts research at the intersection of interpersonal workplace relationships and social network dynamics, including how formal HR practices transform informal social networks, the functional and dysfunctional consequences of workplace relationships, and their temporal and multidimensional features. She frequently presents to and consults for audiences at a variety of corporations and professional organizations on topics ranging from managing personal and organizational networks to the digital HRM transformation. Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining, and over to you.
Thank you so much. I realize that bio is a bit jargony. My goal today is to make the research that I do and the work that I do more accessible. This is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. So thank you guys all for being here and for spending this time with me and for listening. I'm really happy to share with you some of the research that I do and that my colleagues do, and hopefully give you some actionable tips that you can work with and that you can take with you after this webinar that can help you when you're thinking about and building your relationships. So I wanted to start just by posing this really simple question, and you're all here with me, so something spoke to you about the topic of this webinar. But in times of heightened stress, heightened physical distancing, now especially when we are particularly worried about our finances and about our job security and about our health and our family's health, why should we be focusing on relationships? Why are the people who we are connected to something that we should be prioritizing right now? But really, this is the time when they're most critical. It's one of the most important things that we can do for our personal and for our professional well-being is to stay connected to others. And we're seeing a lot of heartwarming examples of that during this time when we don't have as much flexibility to be directly in physical contact with each other. And so what I want to do first is to show you a recent Facebook ad that really resonated with me and that also gets to the heart of why being connected socially and emotionally with other people is so critical. So this is a brief video clip, but I really just wanted to set the stage for what we are going to be talking about.
pivotal historical moment we just went stumbling past. Here we are, dancing in the rumbling dark, so come a little closer. Give me something to grasp. Give me your beautiful, crumbling heart. We're working every dread day that is given us, feeling like the person people meet really isn't us, like we're gonna buckle underneath the trouble, like any minute now the struggle's gonna finish us. And we smile to all our friends. Even when I'm weak and I'm breaking, I stand weeping at the train station, cause I can see your faces. There is so much peace to be found in people's faces. I love people's faces.
So I wanted to share that, one, because it really speaks to me, but also because it just shows how creative we can be when we're thinking about how to connect with people through this virtual divide, in particular right now. So, we know that our relationships are incredibly important. In fact, research shows that they are really critical to our well-being. Uh, just the sense of feeling alone can be just as bad as smoking, obesity, physical inactivity in terms of its effects on our health. So, connecting with others, even through physical distance, can, research shows, improve our cardiovascular system, make our immune system stronger, elicit hormones like oxytocin that actually make us want to trust people more, be more vulnerable, and want to reach out and help others. And so, this idea that our relationship boosts our health is really useful during this time. It curbs the onset of loneliness, helps us build physical and emotional resilience, and also fulfills this inherent sense of belongingness. But not only are our relationships helpful in terms of boosting our health, but they're also there to help us succeed. We know how important building a network of people around us for support is. And so our networks broaden our thinking. They allow us to think about different and new opportunities. They help us bounce back from adversity. They actually expand our action repertoire. So we're willing to take more risks. We feel safer when taking those risks and more supported. They also guide us to new opportunities. When we're looking for new jobs, one of the first things we do is reach out to people, ask for referrals, ask for information or guidance about how we can connect to someone who might have a job opportunity available. So these connections are for our health and therefore our career success. But now, especially, our ability to invest in our relationships is being challenged. The way that we are interacting with other people is fundamentally being altered. The places, the opportunities, the methods that we typically rely on to network are at a standstill. Co-working spaces, coffee shops, convention centers, they're all closed. Business conferences and events, even interviews, are being canceled. So there are a lot of pressing questions that we're facing right now, things that are really concerning us. Will the hold on meetings and interviews torpedo potential job offers? Will someone hire me if they've never met me before? How can I stay connected with colleagues when we're working at a distance? How can I build new connections? How can I leverage my existing connections to help me find a job? And then also, let's not forget, how can we help others? We want to be able to reach out and make sure that other people are getting the support that they need as well. Now, one of the kind of default moves that we've seen people making over the past month or two is to go towards social media. So as the majority of our interactions are being consolidated to virtual networking, we are seeing this hashtag trending, virtual networking, on LinkedIn. So people are thinking, well, how can I broaden the reach of my network? How can I connect to new people if I can't go to the business events that I would have normally gone to? Or I can't go to these co-working spaces or get together with people at coffee shops. And so we are seeing this action towards moving to social media to build these connections and make these connections. It's unclear, though, what the return on that investment is. You might make a one-off connection, but is that someone who's really going to invest in you? Are you willing to invest in that person? How sustainable are those relationships, and really how meaningful are those connections? And we're seeing this complicated even more by what's called virtual distance. So there's research that's been done, and this really was started quite a few years back as we started seeing this trend towards remote work and distributed work. And so the researchers who were studying remote work labeled this virtual distance. And this is the idea that there's a sense of psychological and emotional detachment that grows little by little when our experiences are mediated by devices. And so even if our goal is to meet new people and to network, or even if the majority of our meetings at work right now are virtual, we are feeling this virtual divide. It's very difficult to build meaningful connections in this way. And this research shows that this virtual divide contributes to a decrease in trust, a decrease in innovation, a decrease in the clarity about the way to go about doing our work, about our job roles. And so we see these challenges. Then there's this added complication, and some of you might have been hearing this or having conversations about this, but it's been weighing on me. What if this becomes the new normal? So we're all thinking, oh, well, we're just going to get back to work when, this is over. But there was a recent really provocative article in Fast Company a couple of weeks ago. We're in the midst of a massive work from home experiment. What if it works? And so the worry from my perspective is if managers or organizations recognize that it's less expensive, that it's more efficient, that their employees are just as, or if not more productive when they're working from home. And if we start to realize we can avoid some of the challenges of commuting or the time lost driving to and from work, we might decide that working from home and working remotely does become our new normal. But that is really going to affect how we move forward with building and maintaining our relationships. How are we going to make sure, even when these social distancing measures are rolled back, that we can continue to build and invest in our relationships? And so the question really becomes, where do we go from here? How do we cultivate a set of relationships, and how do we build a network that allows us to maintain a healthy sense of connection, also while keeping our prospective job opportunities in our line of sight? How can we make sure that we're prioritizing and focusing on that? What steps can we take to stay connected while we are physically distant? So before I get into some of the ideas and tips that I want to talk about, I first want you all to take a moment and just reflect. So I've got two poll questions that I want to pose to you, and you should see these come up on the side of your screen. So just take a moment. And for the first question, I want you to think about, on this scale from 1 to 5, how important is having a good network to your ability to accomplish your goals? So think about a personal goal that you have or a professional goal that you have. How important, from 1 being not at all important to 5 being very important, is having a good set of people around you to help you achieve those goals? And I see some of these responses coming in. This is great. Give you a few more seconds, 1 to 5. How important are your networks for your achievement of your goals? And the majority of the responses that I'm seeing, not surprisingly, and we probably all agree on this, is that our networks are incredibly important, right? So most of you have answered a 4 or a 5, that they're really important for accomplishing our goals. So I'd like to move on to the next poll, and this is kind of in comparison to that question. Also, on a scale from 1 to 5, how would you rate the quality of your current network? So the people just kind of give a minute, think about who you're connected to right now. If you needed help, who would you be able to reach out to? Would they be accessible? Would they make themselves available? What's the quality of your current network? So one being very poor, five being excellent, exactly where you need it to be in order to achieve your goals. And I'll just give you a few more seconds to respond to that. Good. So typically when I offer these polls, there's a lot of agreement on how vital, how important our networks are. But then we see kind of responses on the lower end of the scale for the quality of our current network. Essentially that there could be some improvement. Maybe it kind of looks all right, but maybe not exactly where we need it to be. And so, we've got this question, well, why this misalignment? If we know how important our networks are, why do we see a misalignment between where we know they should be and where they actually are? And so what I'd like to do as we move forward is to break down a few myths about networking. And these myths oftentimes create barriers to our strategies and to the efforts that we invest in crafting a good network around us. And so in doing this, we'll be able to identify pathways for creating high quality connections. We'll talk about how to maintain a healthy sense of connection and techniques to build and leverage our connections. So the first myth that I want to pose, and this is in response to research that's been done about how people feel about networking, and also just very anecdotal reports from people when I talk to them about or give training sessions on networking, is that networking feels dirty. So if the goal is to add new people or bring new people into our network and connect with these people, it feels too instrumental. It feels like we're using people. How do we reach out to someone and ask for help if it just feels like we're taking something from them and don't have anything to offer back? That it's disingenuous, that it feels inauthentic. And so I want to really bust this myth that networking is dirty by rethinking what it means to network. And a lot of what this is that it's not about building new connections. It's about thinking about who is in our foundational network, our core network, and how are we treating people who we are already having the opportunity to interact with. So first, I want to talk about this idea of high quality connections. There's been about a decade of research on this notion of high quality connections. So while working remotely offers some advantages, it also poses a lot of challenges in communicating, in collaborating, in coordinating, in finding ways to generate sustained performance. Intentionally building and renewing what we call high quality connections between coworkers can help to remedy some of these challenges. So what do I mean by high quality connections? These are positive interactions, even brief ones. This doesn't mean we need a long, drawn out relationship, deep, intimate relationship, just brief interactions that make you and other people feel seen, feel energized, feel uplifted and engaged and present. And this can happen whether we're doing it virtually or whether we're doing it face to face. While working virtually, these high quality connections can help teams to coordinate. They facilitate knowledge sharing. They help people agree upon goals and show mutual respect. So ways that we can move forward with or generate high quality connections. One is a sense of positive regard. So even if you are on a virtual meeting, the way that you're communicating with people is to see the best in one another, give them the benefit of the doubt. Mutuality, a sense of responsiveness, openness. You're speaking to them, they're speaking to you, you make eye contact, you're engaged. And vitality, a heightened sense of energy. So really being there, being energized, and kind of conveying that energy to other people. And so what are some pathways to building these positive, even brief, high quality connections, either virtually or in person? Well, these involve respectful engagement. So showing the person that you're connecting to that you genuinely care about them and the time that you're spending with them. Turn your video cameras on. Look there. Don't be checking your emails. Make it easy for people to ask for help and to support each other. That's task enabling. So we want to create a psychologically safe environment where people can ask those questions and not feel judged. Also building trust. So creating a space where people can feel vulnerable, where they feel comfortable asking each other questions and speaking honestly about their struggles. Also showing gratitude and compassion builds this trust and connection. And then finally, just having fun. So being playful is a great way to build connections. So there was a recent Harvard Business Review article that I really loved, and that also relates to some research that I've been doing. But this is on the surprising power of simply asking coworkers how they're doing. So just those brief check-ins, shoot someone an email, or at the start of a meeting, if you're just sitting there and no one's on the call yet, just a brief check-in. Hey, how are you doing? And from the research that was done here, 39% of respondents reported that they felt the greatest sense of belonging when their colleagues checked in with them, both personally and professionally. So how are you doing at home? Is there anything I can do to help you at work? And so even just that simple check-in can build a connection and a sense of support. This is also related to some research that I've been doing on small talk. So just really trivial, superficial conversations, ways that we kind of transition into and out of meetings, but that chit chat that we have with coworkers really gives us a sense to connect and build a relationship and show that you notice and acknowledge someone. Interestingly, a handful of companies have been trying to build this in as they've been transitioning to remote work. So there's this company, Zapier, it's an app developer company with about 200 remote employees, and they're doing something really cool. It's a video chat roulette. So every week, someone is randomly paired with one other person in the organization that they might not even know, and they have to spend 30 minutes on a call just talking about something that's not at all related to work. And so they're trying to help them build these connections, not necessarily talking about work, but build a personal connection with someone. In terms of helping to enable tasks, what does this look like in a more actionable sense? Well, one of the fears we hear and the pushback that we get about networking is that it feels like we're using someone. So if I'm going to reach out, cold call someone, or try to connect with them on LinkedIn, why would they answer me if I'm just asking for something? But building a strong network is about mutual relationships and how you can support others. So instead of reaching out and asking for something, reach out and say, how can I help? Is there anything that I can do for you? Whether it's a new person or whether it is someone who you already know but might not have talked to for a while. And so there are a couple of colleagues of mine, Wayne Baker at the University of Michigan and Adam Grant at Wharton at UPenn, and they developed this online web platform called Givitas. And this is a great way to get your teams interacting with each other, to share knowledge, but also to check in with each other. And I love their tagline because connecting online should make you feel better, not worse. And so this is a great way to kind of ease some of the workflow issues, but give people an opportunity to work together, to ask questions, and to provide support versus just asking for help. And then finally, for having fun, this was a great example that I came across on LinkedIn the other day. So the company, namely HR support software company, they have their people team, and they're starting each day with a 15-minute kind of check-in, hello, and a question of the day, which is kind of fun and playful. So their question of that day was, what reality TV show would you want to be on? And it's just kind of fun to give people a chance to joke around, get to know a little something about someone without too much disclosure. So that first myth, networking is dirty, we can really, figure out a way to combat that because it's not necessarily about instrumentality and using people. The second myth, though, and especially now we're seeing people struggle with this as we're feeling more and more isolated, how can I build a bigger and bigger network? So we might feel pressured to connect with a lot of new people. And the thinking really behind that is, the more people that we know, the greater chances that I'll be exposed to new opportunities that could lead to jobs or advancement or meeting a new mentor. But this myth, bigger networks are better, is not true. So what we want to do here is that we want to think about, who am I connected to that gives me opportunities that I value? Who do I respect? What relationships do I have that are fulfilling, that are life-giving, that aren't draining? And so this recent article was talking about building our inner circles and how we can curate our inner circle to be comprised of people who create the foundation for our broader network. And so they use this term super connector. And at first glance, that would seem like we had a really big network, but that's actually not what they're referring to. It's not about supersizing your network. It's about carefully curating the people that we are connected to, those who we admire, those who we respect, those who challenge us, and those that help us learn, to set the tone for our broader network, because those are the people who then can help connect us to other people if we do need some help or some advice. And then our third myth is that networks form naturally. We don't have a lot of control over how ours form or evolve. So oftentimes we see people kind of sitting back and not thinking strategically about what their professional network looks like or what it can do for them. We just kind of become friends with people or meet people or talk with people who we're comfortable with and who are similar to us. And if we were to let our networks form organically, that's what they would look like. But the advice here in kind of overcoming that perspective is that we should think about ourselves as a business. So if we were starting a business, how would we invest in ourselves to make sure we were being as successful as possible? And so what we can do here is assemble our personal board of advisors. So if we were a business, we would bring a set of board members on board to help guide us, to provide advice, and to provide feedback for us to bounce ideas off of. And so we can think of the same thing here, but for us personally, in terms of helping to achieve our personal and professional goals. And so this is based off of research that was done, and a really fantastic book if you guys are interested, Strategic Relationships at Work. So two colleagues of mine, Kathy Cram and Wendy Murphy. This is a phenomenal book. And some of the research that they do with Cotton as well, they ask this question: who takes an active interest in an action to advance your career by providing developmental assistance? And so I want you guys to think about that for a minute. Just be introspective, take some time, think about, if I needed help, finding someone who could provide feedback on something I wrote, or if I was looking for a new business opportunity, or who is it that's always talking about the work that I do and really kind of talking me up for no other reason than that they believe in me. And so let's think about who those people are, our board of advisors. This is our network of developers. And I want you to think broadly. These might be people who are at work or outside of work, in our community or in our family or other industry associates. So who are those people who are looking out for our best interest and looking out for our careers? And what I want you to do here, after we've kind of thought about who those people are and what my network looks like, is to reflect. So there are a few questions that I want you to consider, that we want to pose. Uh, do you seek information about developing? So questions you can ask yourselves. Do I seek information about developing my future career from people who I consider important? So thinking about a broader network, or people who I respect but I might not have a direct connection to right now. Do I actively reach out to them? Do you keep in regular contact with people who are important for your personal and professional development? Am I doing those active check-ins? Am I just, making contact with them, making sure that they're doing okay, or if there's anything that I can help with? Do you try to develop relationships with people who can challenge you and who you can learn from? So this is always good to kind of have a devil's advocate in your developmental network, on your personal board of advisors. So you come up with an idea, and they're there to kind of just push back and challenge you and make you think a little bit more deeply about what you're doing. Do you try to help others when you have the opportunity? So again, this aspect of mutuality, where can you give and how can you help? And then I want us to analyze. So we've now kind of assessed how we've assembled our personal board of advisors. We've reflected on these questions about how we go about doing that. And then we can analyze our network. So what does this look like for us right now? How many people were you able to identify? 2, 3, 10? How many developers do you have? What is the breadth of your network? So, this is again pushing back on that myth that we don't have a lot of control over what our networks look like. And if they were to form organically, we would have a lot of people who were similar to us in terms of age and background and values. But we want diversity in our network. And I don't just mean gender and racial diversity. I mean people who are from different industries, people who are at different levels in the organization, of our network, if I was to give it a metaphor, act as windows out into the world. So they can be blinders if we have a really narrow network, or they can give us a much broader perspective out into what's actually happening from people's different viewpoints. So this diversity in our network can really give us a way to think about things differently and to challenge ourselves as well. How connected is your network? So were you able to come up with 2, 3, 4 people and all of those people know each other? It's great to have groupings of people who aren't all connected to each other. And that's because they help us link or bridge to different groups of people who aren't otherwise connected. And those separate differentiated groups all give us novel information. Right? We can think about having our core network of people, our best friends, our family members, they all likely know each other. And so we're getting really repetitive information from them because they're all sharing the same information as well. We want connections that are going to help us to bridge to other groups that have unique information. And that helps us with things like job opportunities and mobility, and even faster rates of promotion because we're getting new and unique information. And then finally, the depth of this network. So for the people who you were able to identify, how close are you to them? These don't need to be best friends, and we should have some variance in the depth or the intimacy of our relationships. We don't want to have 15, 20, 30 people that we're all best friends with because that takes a lot of time and a lot of emotional investment. But we do want to have a core group of people who we know we can be vulnerable to, who we can rely on, who we can ask our silly questions to, or to just vent and ensure that they can be empathetic and give back. But we want a variety of and a balance of, say, acquaintances in our network and really strong, deep connections. And then as we've analyzed our network, we can also plan. So what actions can we take if we're thinking about not only our personal board of advisors, but we're thinking about curating our core network of people, or we're thinking about how we can build high quality connections? What I'd like you to do moving forward is to just identify one opportunity or one challenge that you would like to pursue in the future. So where we're sitting right now, what's the one pressing thing? Do you want to start a business? Do you want to create new opportunities for yourselves? So what is that one challenge? And as you're thinking about that, how is your personal board of advisors, your developmental network, going to help you do that? So how can they help you achieve this and be specific about the people who can help? Which connection do you have who can help introduce you to someone else who might be able to help you push forward with this business venture idea that you have? If there's not someone in your network who can help you do that, who is missing? What type of help is missing? So we might need to be able to get buy-in from a supervisor. There's an idea that you've really had that you wanted to move up the ladder, but you're missing the buy-in from the person that you report to or from senior leadership. Who can help you get to that point? How can you leverage the current set of relationships that you have to meet new people who can help you? So again, thinking about your carefully curated foundational network, this core group of people, who can you reach out to say, listen, this is what I need. Can you introduce me to so-and-so? Those indirect connections are a lot more effective than cold calling. Something else that we can do is reactivate our dormant ties. We'll talk about that in terms of strategies as well. And what specific actions can we take? So now I know what help is missing. I know who can help me do this. What specific actions can I take? How can I dive in? And so finally, we can think about strategies to engage new advisors. So maybe we don't have the people in our current board of advisors in our developmental network who can help us with what we need right now. So be proactive, reach out broadly and often. So this is where we can now start to say, well, is there someone who I know on LinkedIn or someone who I know in person who can connect me to someone else on LinkedIn? So think about this as part of your daily routine, right? Like what 10 or 15 minutes can I take where I'm working towards actively building my network? This was also what I was mentioning with reconnecting with dormant ties. There's some really neat research on what's called dormant ties. These are people who you may not have connected to recently. So these are people who you know, you might have known from college or from a former job, but you might not have spoken to them in the last year or 2 years or even 10 years. And so reaching out to that person, this is someone who already knows you, knows what your background is and how worthwhile you are. And so reaching out to that person and just saying, hey, it's been a while. I wanted to see what you were up to. How are you doing through this time? So reconnecting is a great way to engage new people. And then also just manage your interactions. So if we're having virtual interactions, be very prepared for those meetings, listen carefully, convey appreciation. So demonstrating gratitude and compassion and appreciation really helps to forge those connections. And then keep in touch regularly. So build in as part of that, who is the one person that I can connect to or that I can reach out to today, a new person each week. Create opportunities for mutual learning. I heard that you were interested in this. I'm interested in something that you're doing. Can we talk about these things? And then also be realistic and respectful. This is a hard time for everyone. And so being able to be very aware and empathetic to what people might be experiencing right now and being sensitive to that. Great. So that is the majority of what I wanted to talk about and to share with you in terms of creating our networks is that it is strategic, that we are able to actively manage them, and that we should treat them and ourselves like a business. How can we invest? How can we make sure that we're doing this actively? And how can we make sure that we are building meaningful connections while we're all kind of isolated? And this can help us stay healthier as well. So this is better for our mental and physical health, as well as for our success in our careers. And so this was actually just a primer. So if any of you are interested, I also wanted to share that there'll be the opportunity to talk in more depth so we can do a much deeper dive. On Wednesday, June 17th, I will be offering a 2-hour virtual workshop where we'll be talking a lot more about this and being much more detailed and specific about each of your networks and some actions that we can take to develop those. So I would love for you to join me in June as well. And so one of the last things that I wanted to share, obviously this is how you can connect with me. I'd be happy to connect with you to talk more, to answer any questions that you have after this webinar. But I also wanted to share that I recently launched a website called High Q Connections. So earlier on, we were talking about how we can build high quality connections. And so this website that I co-founded with two colleagues of mine, Wendy Murphy being one of them, who wrote the Strategic Relationships book, we did this in an effort to pull together and interpret a lot of the research on relationships at work and present more digestible ways to leverage that research. So actionable tips, what this means right now during this time. We've got some great affiliate members who've been posting on this as well. So if you want to visit this website, highqconnections.com, or you can follow us on Twitter, which is a new thing for us, at highqualcons. We're constantly sharing resources and information and research that can help us all understand how we can develop these relationships and just do better. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you being here with me. And Bethany, over to you.
Hello. Yes, thank you so much, Jessica. That was amazing. We have about 5 minutes or so for some question and answers. So if you have any questions that you'd like Jessica to answer, we can get to some of them probably today. If not, I'll make sure to send them to her and she can respond to you individually. But first, I wanted to mention two questions that I'm sure that, Jessica, you've been asked frequently during this time. The first one is, what's the number one thing that you suggest people do now to either build or maintain their network? The number one thing.
Yeah, in the context of everything that we just talked about, I think the one thing that we can do is to not worry about how big our network is getting, right? So build this time into our day and strategize. So again, if we were thinking about this as work, if we were investing in ourselves in terms of our career as a business, how would we build this into our to-do list? And so each week, as part of our to-do list, we should have a task. How can I connect with someone new? How can I connect with someone I already know? And as we start to create this routine, it starts to become more comfortable. It starts to become more ritualistic. And as we do this, it becomes a habit, right? It's a skill that we can build. And so this idea of leveraging our connections, building our connections is a skill. And so it's just something that we have to continue to practice. And the more comfortable we become with it, the easier it becomes and the more effective we become at it. So I would say just build that into your weekly to-do list.
Fantastic. Okay. Another question that has been, I think, on people's minds is, what's the biggest struggle people are going to face as they return to the workplace in terms of their relationships?
Yeah, this one is really is a really tough one. Our routines have changed, our daily rituals have changed, and the way that we're interacting with people has changed. So, everyone is always talking about how the younger generations, the technology-based generations, the digitally native generations, they find it much easier to communicate online.
Right.
I don't necessarily think that's how a lot of us feel. I think we're missing our daily connections and interactions. And so I think we need to be strategic and really plan for how we're going to make that transition back and not just fall back on or continue to rely on virtual communication. That we really do need to actively say, let's meet in person again once we can. Let's be able to sit together again. Let's go to a coffee shop and let's meet. I think the other struggle, and this is in response to some of the challenges that we face and the myths that we think about networks, is that if we're focusing on these relationships, don't worry about building new connections. Make sure that you are focusing on how you can help others, right? So how can we kind of turn that on its head? And it's not about getting help for me. It's about making sure that I've connected with someone who I already know. And that makes networking more approachable and
Sure, yeah.
less uncomfortable, right? And so I think that that's a great way to think about it as that kind of one action that you have during the week. Is there someone who you can reach out to and thank? Right? Who can you send an email to or write a quick text to and just say, hey, we haven't talked in a while, but I've been thinking about you. And I wanted to thank you for so-and-so. I just had a student do this for me last week. I haven't had her in class in 3 years. And she just sent me an email and said, I've been thinking about emailing you. And I just never got around to it. And now I thought was a really great time to just let you know how much your class meant to me. And that was so meaningful to me that I wanted to reach back out to her and say, great, what are you doing and how can I help? And that's
awesome.
that mutual giving, that mutual learning that I think really helps to break down some of this, the barriers to networking that we typically come across.
That's fantastic. That's great. So there are tons of questions that have come in, and they're all very, very good. But in interest of time, I'm actually just going to just do one, and then I'll send you the rest. So sorry.
Great. Thank you guys so much. I'm
Yeah.
happy to continue to respond, and please email me.
Yes, I'm going to somehow capture all these questions, and I'll definitely send them to her. Okay, so here's a question. Interactions with those I normally have that are great in person, that I have with great in-person relationships, they seem to be more taxing, and they're really not quality interactions during this time. Do you have any advice for returning to a quality interaction?
I think that is such an important question. And I think it's something that we're all experiencing right now because we feel that virtual distance that I was talking about, we all feel because it's easy to just shrink back and turn off our videos and just keep doing what we're doing and not be present. I love that question. One of the things that we can do is, and there's research on this about artifacts. So we can show a little bit about our workspace, for example. So if we're working virtually, say, oh, where are you working from today? Tell me about your room. Or show me something that you have in your workspace that has meaning for you. And that builds that high quality connection. Again, even though it's virtual, even though it's brief, take, just a couple of minutes to say, tell me about where you're working right now. And that gives us this sense that we're all together, even when we're not. And then just keeping our videos on. I have some great resources from a professor at the University of Michigan, Jane Dutton. She's been writing a lot on this, and she does research on high quality connections too. She's got some phenomenal tips on how we can turn our virtual meetings into something that's more meaningful. So I'd be happy to share those as well if you reach out to me. Just really, really useful tips. But great question.
Yes, thank you. All right, that's all the time we have for the questions. I will definitely, again, copy all these questions and send them over to Jessica so she can, what would be really interesting if we could copy the questions and maybe we can send the responses in like a one-pager somehow to all the participants. I think that would be really helpful. Somebody asked that. Yeah, I think we can do that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'd be happy to do that.
That's great. All right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Let's go to the next slide real quick. I just want to talk about just our upcoming webinars. We now have a dedicated webinar site where you can see all of our upcoming programs. So we're going to be hosting some additional free webinars at 11 a.m. every Wednesday through the rest of April, and then all throughout May. And we're also going to be hosting these online workshops, Jessica's included, in the coming weeks that are a deeper dive into the critical topics like building a social network and leading virtual teams. Last week's panelist, if you were able to join us, Marianne Spatola is going to be doing a two-hour workshop on leading successful virtual teams. That's going to be May 14th. And then Jessica's 2-hour workshop, Jumpstarting Your Professional Network, is going to be on June 17th. So we'll be sharing more information and getting those links up and over to you very soon. But all the other the webinars that you see right here are available on our website. So that concludes today's webinar. As I mentioned earlier, a link to this recording of the presentation is going to be emailed to you shortly. We usually send it out within 24 hours. And for more information on Rutgers Similar's executive and professional education and to register for upcoming programs, visit our website, which is similar.rutgers.edu/content/executive and professional education. So thank you again, Jessica, for presenting and joining us. Thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you, guys.
All right, take care.